Hi, I'm going to give you some quick tips for how to style your mantle, and I'm going to call it creating a mountain range, okay? So take a look at your mantle. It's essentially like one big giant piece of paper. And tip number one is all about proportion. Now think back to when you were in school and your teacher gave you that blank piece of paper and said, draw me a picture and don't leave any white space. I don't want to see any white space. Well, she didn't really mean don't leave any white space, but she did want you to create a picture that was in proportion to the paper. And same thing with your mantle. You don't want to put a lot of tiny little picture frames lined up and then leave all blank space behind it. And you don't want to put something so monstrous that it eats up the entire space, although a lot of times something big is better. But you just want things to be in proportion to the length of your mantle and the height of your ceiling. And you want to kind of keep the scale of what you're doing up there with that space. So first, proportion. Think of it as one big giant piece of paper and you're going to create a picture on there, just like in school. The second thing is to think of it, like I said, as creating a mountain range. And so let's say you were drawing a picture of a mountain range. Well, to do that effectively, you would have mountains different sizes, different shapes. You might have some mountains or what's the term, foothills in the foreground and some further back. And you're going to have different peaks and valleys along the way on your paper. And the same thing with your mantle. If you're creating it with the idea of a mountain range in your head, you're going to have some really high things, some lower things, some space in between, some things in front of others, that kind of thing. So it looks realistic, there's depth, and your eye kind of moves along the higher points and the lower points. So that's the idea of a mountain range. That's number two. Third thing, pick your central piece. I love a mirror. I love a mirror because it reflects the light around the room. I love the mirror because it makes your space feel bigger. And I also love a mirror because it's neutral. You can keep the mirror in place all year round. It doesn't really dictate much else going on in the room. I mean, mine's kind of ornate, but it does pick up the black in the fireplace, so I like that. And then you can just vary all the smaller items that you're going to put up on your mantle and change it up. You could also use one big piece of art, but depending on how powerful the art is, it's going to kind of, it's going to be bossier than a mirror because it's going to kind of run the show of what else you do up there. So I like a mirror. This mirror on its own would be much too small. If you wanted to just do a simple mantle with one big statement piece, you'd have to go larger than this because you really should keep the rule of 2/3 the length of the mantle. Should be the size of whatever it is you put up there. But because I'm doing this mountain range, I can get away with a smaller mirror. Okay, so that's the statement piece. Now you're going to add layers. So we've got proportion, creating the mountain range on that blank piece of paper, picking your central piece, and now layering. And layering just is about adding depth to the space so that, you know, like a mountain range, you're not going to have mountains lined up one, boom, 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 boom. They kind of recede into the distance or extend into the distance, and then they also have some in the foreground, the foothills. So you can layer some artwork in front of your big central piece, small paintings, any type of art like that, and that's just going to give you a little bit of depth. But now we've got a lot of angular pieces going on already, well two. So you want to add different shapes and some curves to your mantle. And so that's the next tip, is adding something to counteract all those angles. And so I like to use this nice big vase or a big vase like it because it's round. I also like to put some different, I mix this up depending on the season, and I always love to add something that's alive or has been alive, something organic, and that would be another tip, that not only do you have something round here, but you've also got something that's either like a plant or was a plant. In this case, I've got some dried pods, and it just adds another little element to the mantle. You can also see that's going to be my highest peak in my mountain range because it goes all the way up to the ceiling. Okay, the next tip is all about, so we've got bringing in something round, bringing in something that's alive and really high. We need something that's horizontal. Everything right now is very vertical. So what I've got here is just a tiny little rosewood box. And if I put that right about there, it just adds something a little bit horizontal. But that alone would be kind of too much, too little. So it also serves as a nice little perch or pedestal for something different. And so I'm going to use this little bookend that I have. It's a fish. And it just lifts it up a little bit. Whereas if I just put the book in here, it's just not quite as, I don't know, I like it up on something. There's something about raising it, brings attention to it. So I've got my little bookend. It's also something else that's kind of curvy to counteract a lot of those angles. Okay, now take a step back. What's missing? Some people, this is my last tip, some people love symmetry. They would really feel like you need to have another one of these over here to make it complete. If you're one of those people, I'd say that's fine, go for it. I sometimes like that, but more often than not, I like not so much symmetry, but balance. And so yes, something needs to be over here for sure, but I don't think it needs to be exactly the same thing. It has to have some heft, some bulk, because that is a big piece, that vase. But I'm going to try this lantern. And so, I almost don't want to break that either. If we put the lantern up there, let's see how that works. It's kind of a heavier piece, even though it's smaller, but it's got some of the curves. Even though it is quite angular, it does still have some curves and intricacies that kind of work with the vase. And it just adds balance to the mantle. Now there's something keeping it in proportion on both sides. And I'm going to leave it at that. I don't like to overclutter it, but that's just my tips for creating your mantle.